Hello, everyone, and welcome to Spectrum Sessions, the podcast where we platform unfiltered autistic voices and celebrate our differences. I'm Heather from the National Autistic Society Scotland, and today we're here with the incredible Ashley Storrie. Ashley, it's amazing to have you here today. Could you please introduce yourself to anyone who doesn't know who you are?
Sure. I'm Ashley Storrie. I started off as a stand-up comedian and now I work in television and I make and act in a show called Dinosaur that's on Hulu and BBC Three. And it's about Nina, who's a paleontologist who loves her family very much. And she's also autistic.
Could you tell us about one of your current special interests or hyperfixations?
Oh, okay, sure. Always fan fiction. Always, constantly. I wouldn't be a writer if fan fiction didn't exist. I wouldn't have known how to write. There was no platform or anywhere for me to do that, to express myself. So God bless the people at fanfiction.net and Archive of Our Own, because without you, I'm nothing, friends. I think also just now, fishing.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, I go through cycles of being really into like crab fishing TV programs and also chess. I'm trying to learn how to play chess. So it's less a hyperfixation and more I'm forcing myself to play it every day because I want to learn to play chess because I want to write a sitcom set in the world of chess that nobody believes me is going to be a hit, but I've got good feelings about it.
That's really cool. Are you progressing with your chess? Are you learning? You doing well?
I don't have chess brain. That's not my kind of autism, is what I've learned. Is there's some autistic people who are great at chess and I just don't have chess brain. I've got good story brain, but bad chess brain.
I'd say I'm much the same with that. You were diagnosed in your early 30s. Can you talk a bit about your diagnosis journey and how it felt to finally discover that you were autistic?
I say I was diagnosed in my early 30s, but I knew when I was 16 because I did psychology as a higher and we got given the Baron-Cohen test to read over, which was the early testing method for Asperger's, which we don't call it now. And I was like, oh my God, my dad has Asperger's. And he went to the doctors and within I don't think there's ever been a man as quickly diagnosed in the entire world. But because my dad had been odd and he did a really difficult time with his mental health and he did a really difficult time with his life and there was never any explanation. Have you got a wee dog?
Downstairs neighbours do, but I do as well. Yes, I do. I've got a dog and 3 cats. So I've got a full house, but it's the downstairs neighbour's dog that's barking away at the moment.
Their wee doggy. I'm like, oh no. Let him in, it's fine. But no, it's your downstairs neighbours. As you can see, I have hyperhearing. Daddy was very different and weird and wasn't fitting in and he'd never had friends and he really struggled. And so I saw this diagnosis protocol and I was like, oh, that's my dad. And he went to the doctors and he got diagnosed and then I think a couple of years later I went to the doctors and I said, I think I might have this too. It was different for girls back then. There wasn't a lot of understanding of it, but I knew that I didn't just have anxiety because that's what the doctor kept telling me. I just had anxiety. And I remember my doctor saying, look, you probably do, but it won't help you get employed if you get diagnosed. And I was maybe 19. So from the age of 19, I was like, oh, I have this thing, but I have to keep it a secret because I won't get employed.
Okay, yeah.
So that's the long, winding way. And then it became more talked about and more acceptable and more a thing that was allowed as a girl, as I got older. And I just wanted to know, because what if I didn't? What if I went to doctors and I went through the process of getting diagnosed and they went, no, it's something else. And then what did that mean? And I got really hyperfixated on that. And what if I'm faking it? Like, that's a big, weird thing that you're like, what if my brain has tricked me for all this time into thinking I'm this way? And it's actually just, I don't know. It was a very weird experience. But then again, when I read because of course, I don't know if you got notes or feedback, but I asked for notes and feedback, and I read my assessment and I was like, oh, Ashley, you needn't have worried.
Yes.
So yeah, that's the long winding road, but it's something that I always knew about myself. As soon as I knew what Asperger's was, I was like, oh, tick, 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 tick. But shush, and try and be normal so that you can get employed. Oh, and I don't blame the doctor. He was a very, very old man, and he just came from a different generation. And he also said to me, sometimes people like you are just like that. And that was also a diagnosis of his.
No, I get that. And the fear of going and trying getting your diagnosis and then being like, oh, what if I don't have it? Then what on earth is wrong with me? Like, why am I so different from everyone else if there's no explanation? So yeah, I think you sort of do have that worry before you get a late diagnosis when you are that sure about that you're autistic. But it's good that you had some relief, hopefully, when you were diagnosed.
I did, and it was mainly just, oh, I'm allowed to be this way now and I'm going to stop pretending. It was a big, big unmasking.
What was it like for you to grow up without a diagnosis? Did you find yourself masking in order to fit in?
I did find myself masking in order to fit in. It was really, really difficult to... I thought everybody was just going about their life, waking up every day and thinking, how can I pretend to be normal? And I thought we were all doing that. Every girl I went to school with was waking up every day and thinking, how can I be a person? And I didn't know that was just me. That was doing that every day. I would wake up and I'd be like, today's the day, Ashley, you're going to nail being a person and you're going to really get it right this time. And I'd think of all the little things I'd have to do and try and like make a list in my head. Don't talk too much about yourself. Don't talk too much about this. It gets quite stressful when I think about it now, because even now I do things and then an hour later I'm like, oh, I wish I hadn't done that. But back then it was like every minute, everything I said, everything I did felt wrong and bad. And so it wasn't pleasant.
No, it isn't for a lot of autistic young people who grow up undiagnosed, definitely, especially in school with masking and constantly just trying to pretend to be someone else.
Yeah, but then I think if I'd known, would I be the person I am today? Would I have the same sort of like defense mechanisms that are pretty much like part of my whole persona? Would I have the same? I don't know. It's one of those catch-22 things where a lot of my good qualities come from the fact that I had to pretend or be different, pretend not to be different, and even though it was very stressful, it's one of those things that I don't know if it would have served me who I am today if I'd been diagnosed very, very young, or if it would have.
Yeah, it's a conversation that I've had a lot recently because if you think about young people getting diagnosed before they start struggling, I'm sure they would view it as, oh, I don't want to be autistic. Like, I don't want this part of me. Like, they'd really not like it because it differs them from other people. But I think when you grow up already knowing you're different and not realizing why, and you do struggle through school, I think that it comes as a relief later on. But yeah, I think it's strange how that might work in some ways. It might be a bit of a good thing to be like diagnosed late because then you view it as more positively. So yeah,
I guess that a lot of the tools I learned just from struggling, a lot of the coping mechanisms are good things. So yeah.
In April of last year, the TV show Dinosaur aired, where you starred as the character of Nina. You also co-wrote alongside Matilda Curtis. I absolutely adored the show, and I know that many of my colleagues at NAS did as well. Whenever anyone asks me what's good autism representation on TV, I always point them straight to Dinosaur. So congratulations, it's incredible.
Oh, thank you.
Can you talk a bit about what the show's like for anyone who hasn't seen it?
Sure. It's very gentle. It's very comedic. We kind of tried to create a world where everybody's just very accepting of autism rather than a world where she has to constantly keep explaining it or keep having to gain acceptance. So Nina's character's family is very just kind of like have known she's autistic, are very autistic literate, sometimes a bit too literate. But everybody's very kind and accepting and helpful. There's a show called Schitt's Creek where there's a gay character and there's LGBTQ characters, and rather than have a world where they constantly had to defend that, they just created a world where it was fine to be that. And so then you could have stories and interesting things where that wasn't the centre point and the centre focus. It was just a part of it. And I kind of thought that would be nice for like an autistic character. So yeah, Nina is autistic, but it's like the fourth most interesting thing about her. And she meets a boy who she really likes, and her sister's getting married, and she meets her boy who she doesn't like. And it's very gentle, it's fun, it's not too high stress, but I like it. I don't know what else to say.
No, it's amazing. And you're writing season 2 for it, aren't you, at the moment?
Yeah, that's what we're doing just now. We're writing season 2, which is exciting, throwing new challenges and getting also to like see the old family again, who I love the family. They're my favourites to write. I love writing Nina, but I just feel like Nina's just how I would react. So I like writing the family because that's actually like different for me.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Can you talk about the experience of creating Dinosaur and whether there was any challenges along the way?
Sure. So Dinosaur, I wasn't originally hired as a writer. I was originally cast as an actor when Dinosaur was just a pilot for the BBC during lockdown. And after lockdown, it took a year or two, and then it got picked up by Hulu. And then the BBC signed on to co-produce it with Hulu. And as a result, I then kind of got brought on as a consultant because they wanted an actual neurodiverse perspective. Matilda's got family who are neurodiverse, but she's not herself neurodiverse. And then after I'd kind of come in with some ideas and things, they were like, oh, do you want to maybe be a co-creator? And I was like, oh, okay. And then they were like, do you want to write an episode? And I was like, yeah, okay. And they were like, do you want to be an associate producer? And I was like, okay. So I had gone from sending in a tape to a casting director to being a creator and a producer on a TV show, which was super exciting. And then the writing process, I mean, we have it's a show about autism written by somebody on the spectrum, and the production and staff are all really, really not cautious, they're all very conscious of that. And they took time to like be more literate and to make like call sheets more accessible so there's less information in them, because I don't like getting big chunks of text. And they just made everything more accessible. They also asked the entire crew, like, not, oh, what are your needs or anything. They were just like, is there anything that you need to make your job better? Like, it wasn't just me. I wasn't singled out. Every single person in the crew got treated the same way. Every single person in the cast got treated the same way. So there wasn't just a special call sheet for Ashley. The call sheet was the same for everybody. The process was the same for everybody. And what we found was our crew, neurotypical and neurodiverse alike, were like, oh, this is a lot better and a lot nicer. And we like this a lot better. And this is a much more pleasant way to work. We tried to like not have raised voice, not be like sensitive, but just like don't scream at people, which you'd think was like a normal thing, but in television and the TV industry, it's like just accepted that somebody's going to scream at people because they don't get what they want, and we didn't stand for that.
Yeah, that's great. It's great that it was such an inclusive experience and for filming. That's great. In what ways are you similar to Nina, and in what ways are you different?
Similar wise, I think personality, humour were very similar. I think she thinks she's funny and I think I'm funny, and that's what I think is funny. It's not that Nina is funny, it's that Nina thinks she's funny, and I think that that's hilarious. And I think that's hilarious in me, because I know when I say something funny and everybody stares at me and I'm like, nah, I'm hilarious. Which then just adds to the joke. We're different in that she's a lot smarter than me. She's maybe not as social as me. Though I force myself to be social, it's not something I like. It's just something that I do because otherwise I'd never leave my house. And I think another similarity is that I think we both have this desire to live a bigger life than our brain thinks we're capable of. And I know that's a really weird concept to grasp, but my brain is like, stay inside, stay here, do this one thing, and you'll be happy. And I will be happy, but I don't think I'll be fulfilled. And so I strive for this fulfillment against all of my like default instincts of don't do this. It's not, it's too hard and it's scary and it's too much work. But I want to live a big life. I look at my dad and his life is very small and he's happy, but it's a small life. And I don't want that. And so I think the thing that I share with Nina is that we like push ourselves to do stuff that maybe our brain doesn't want to do, but we want to do, if that makes any sense.
No, that makes 100% sense, and it's really relatable, definitely. I think that a lot of autistic people, me as example, I would like to just stay in my house and play The Sims and do my job, whatever, just chill at home, not really go out and socialize much because, it is harder for me to go out and do things like that. But, when I do it, it's more fulfilling and it is a more interesting life that I want to lead. So I do have to push myself more. And I think it's about making society more inclusive so that we can go out and push ourselves more and not feel so burnt out afterwards or exhausted.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I don't know how that would work. I think I'm always thinking about everybody else and I'm like, gosh, I don't know how they're going to get to my inclusion when they can't get to like the top tier of inclusion.
Yeah.
That's again, I like to categorize things and list things and other people don't like it when you do that. So I shan't.
Well, I guess it's even, how your workplace, when you were filming the show, they were very inclusive to you and they made it easier for you to do that. And I think helping with workplaces, making small changes can make a big difference to helping autistic people go and do stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think that any sort of like inclusion of any sort of mental health thing as well, that was another part of like what we discussed on set a lot was like people have bad days and that's allowed and people have but days of like my period really badly affects my brain. And the day before it I can be like very overwhelmed and very easily like snapped and triggered. I hate the word triggered. So I can be very activated just through my hormones. And it's like my hormones and my autism converge into this like very scary Genghis Khan inside my head that's wanting to just go mad. And I had to say to a bunch of like wee guys called like Tam and Joycey, I was like, this, just so you know, it's coming in 3 days. It's not your fault. I'm going to be deadly for a day and I apologize in advance. And I don't know, I'll just cry a lot. And I cried a lot and nobody cared. I would just go and sit in my car. They'd be like, where's Ashley? She's in a crying car. And it's like, oh, okay.
That's good that they were sort of understanding. That's really good.
So what else are they going to do? Be like,
Yeah.
no, you can't do that. I mean, that's the thing is, it's just with autism, with any part of you that you can't really help or control, you just have to be honest about it, I think.
Yeah. What was your favourite part of filming Dinosaur?
Going to Rothsay was my favourite part of filming Dinosaur. The sun, it was just a beautiful day. We all had a great night out when we were there. It was kind of the first time that the crew and the cast got to bond. Sally, who plays my mum, was on great form. And we just it kind of was like the hen party that you see on screen is really rubbish and boring, but the kind of fun we had off screen was really good. We all just bonded and I think it was a really great way. It was very early on in the filming process we filmed that, so I think it was just a great way for everybody to like bond and get to know each other.
When writing the script, was there anything that you felt was really important to include from the perspective of an autistic character? For example, was there something that you wanted neurotypical viewers to understand better?
There's a scene in episode 3 where Nina's got a lot on and she decides to do 2 things in one day, which I know sounds like nothing, but sometimes if I've got stuff to do, I can do one thing. Like I can do one big thing in a day, and then that's it. I can't do two big things in a day.
Yeah.
And it's just impossible for me. And I kind of try to articulate that, how difficult it is and how overwhelming it is to do two big things in a day when your brain's not fully prepared for it. And it was Nina has a meltdown, but it wasn't, I guess it wasn't like the idea of a meltdown that we've previously seen on television, on different shows. I mean, I try not to watch a lot of TV where, especially when it's like a neurotypical playing autistic in a sort of what I would deem offensive way. But my dad loves The Good Doctor. He thinks that show is top notch cracking. I sit beside him and I stare at him, and he's like, "Sean hates the way the toilet paper's been put on," and I'm like, "Really, Dad?" But he identifies with that and he really likes it. But I remember seeing that character in an episode have a wobble, and I was like, "Oh, that was a bit not to 100, whereas I know mine's more like a simmer, and then it comes to a boil, and then I can maybe pull it down a bit, and it's not just like, I'm being irrational and reacting irrationally. There's a build and there's a logic in my head to how I'm feeling, even though there's not a logic externally, maybe. Or maybe there is a logic externally. So yeah, to kind of show that the idea of a meltdown and to have it culminate in screaming in a bush was something that had happened to me on a day where I had gone to do stand-up comedy at a big festival. My friend had decided halfway home she didn't want to drive anymore, and we were going to stop at a hotel in Carlisle, and I'm like, I can't stop at a hotel in Carlisle. I can't stay in a hotel that I've not looked at on the internet. And it was just this whole thing, and I had to get her to pull over the car, and I just screamed in a bush. And it wasn't the way meltdowns were described on TV. It was just my own special one. So I kind of wanted to show a version of a meltdown that wasn't just painted as an irrational tantrum. That you could follow Nina's journey, even if you weren't autistic, to go, oh, I can see why that would be hard.
Yeah, it was really, really good to see in episode 3. And just seeing the way it built up, and then eventually, screaming in the bush, at the end. But I think just the way that the plans changed on her last minute, and then that was if a plan changed on me last minute, I would be absolutely like, thrown by that as well. And I think that doing a couple big things in one day, it can just be a lot. It was a really, really good and relatable scene, I thought.
Good. And I think also just the sort of like her sort of like hangover after it, where she's really sweaty but like quite happy because it's all kind of come out. That's the other thing you don't really see about meltdowns, is like there is that sort of afterglow of like, oh, okay, everything's all right. And she's kind of just dazed and a bit sleepy.
Yeah, a bit exhausted.
Yeah.
Do you find that writing is helpful to you as an autistic person? So for me, writing helps me to organize my thoughts. It's like I can't understand what I'm thinking or feeling until I write it down. And we've had authors on the podcast before, and they've said very much the same.
I love writing. I could, if I was just to be put in a pod with a laptop, I'd be entertained for the rest of my life just from writing. Also, if it had The Sims on it, that would be a boon. But
The Sims.
yeah, oh God. I don't want to tell you how many hours of The Sims I've played or how much money I've spent on The Sims in my lifetime, but I have owned every extension pack, every game since I'm old enough to have owned Sims 1. Okay?
Yeah, wow. I started Sims 3.
Oh, you're a child. But I love writing, and I think it's great, not just to like work out my feelings and sort out my head, which it's great for, but it's just great to sort of, on days where I can't go out, on days when maybe I don't want to socialise or explore the world, I can in my head, and I can sort of do that via the art of creative writing.
Yeah.
It's mainly fan fiction. Again, can't stress that enough. Big old nerdy nerds.
Do you still write fan fiction, or was that something
No,
you...
I do it, and I post it under pseudonyms, and I live in constant fear that people are going to work out it's me.
What sort of like fandoms do you write?
Harry Potter. Don't talk about it, Heather. It's Harry Potter. Everybody knows this. It's big old Harry Potter, big novels, big thick novels that are like, I think I've written like 3 War and Pieces that I worked out. And yeah, I love it, and I just can't stop myself. And it makes me feel very happy. It's my proper, like, I can disappear for 7 hours and pop up and be like, oh, I've written 60,000 words. But
Jeez.
I can write really fast now, and I can generate content really quickly, and it's trained my brain storytelling wise. Like, I read the stuff I wrote when I was 16. There are videos of me reading it to my mum for charity, and it's some of the worst, awfulest stuff in the world. But I think it's really good to show that process of, here's my junk, here's my bad stuff, here's the stuff I wrote, because then I learned tricks, and I learned ideas, and I learned how to make it better, and I think that's important.
Yeah, it's really cool how you learned and through sort of your passions, and I'm guessing special interests sort of thing. Because when I grew up, Harry Potter, and it still is one of my special interests, I was absolutely obsessed.
Oh yeah, still couldn't. Yeah, love it. I've never, going to be honest with you, Heather, don't like the films. Not a big fan of the films. I read Harry Potter when I was 11, and in my head, and this is so stupid, but in my head, because I read it when I was 11, everybody sounded like me. And then I remember going to the cinema to see the first one, and I was so excited. And I remember walking in, sitting down, and it's like, oh, no, no. And then they get to Diagon Alley, and there's a kid, and he goes, it's the Nimbus 2000, it's the fastest broom yet. And I was like, oh, they're all really posh. And then they got to the school, and everybody was really rich in English. And I was like, but it's a state school. It's not fee paying. And my mum was like, shut up. And I was like, no, but mum, it's a Scottish school in Scotland without fees. Why is everybody so posh? And then Ron Weasley, and he's like, oh, I'm poor. And I'm like, you live in a 3-story house in the countryside, sir. Go away. No, I did not enjoy the film.
It might be that I'm a bit younger, but I quite enjoyed the films and the books, definitely. I think probably because I grew up with them.
Well, no, Heather, you're completely fine. I'm very much on my own in this camp. I've met other people, and they're like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, I just thought everybody was Scottish and poor, and I don't know why. Leave me alone.
That's funny. So to move on, the show demonstrates the fact that big life changes can be difficult for autistic people. When you were creating the show, did you draw from personal experiences of coping with big changes in your life?
I did. My life has been through a lot of changes, very dramatic ones. I shan't go into detail. There's like books and that my mum wrote, but yeah, we've moved house, we lost our family, everything bad that could happen happened. It's like a Charles Dickens novel. And I watched how hard that was on my dad, and it was really hard on me, but it was harder on him. So I had that sort of, I think anybody who's grown up with a sibling who, or a parent who's had more profound problems and more profound needs will know that sort of your kind of stuff gets put on the back burner. So a lot of those kind of feelings I had got put on the back burner because my dad was really not coping. So it was kind of nice with Nina to explore the effects of change and kind of the agency around change, and how she wanted to kind of be in control of that idea of change.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It was good to see her exploring that change for herself and sort of come to terms with it in her own time. Definitely.
Yeah.
What do you hope that people take away from watching the show?
I first of all hope they're just entertained, because it's telly, and telly should be entertaining. So I hope they're entertained. And I hope that anybody who is neurodiverse or just a bit different takes away that that's okay. That it's better to be, like, to thine own self be true sort of thing. I hope that they take away that it's okay to be different. It used to be when I was a kid, it's cool to be weird, but let's put weird aside, and let's put like the idea of normalcy aside, and just, I think that every character in Dinosaur has their own idiosyncrasies and their own oddities without having the idea of autism, and that's one of my favourite things, is like sometimes the family are super irrational and stupid and do idiot stuff, and Nina's the sane one, and it's all kind of through her lens. I don't know if you notice this, but like it's all through Nina's perspective, so you don't ever really leave Nina's side. So there's not a scene that she's not in. You don't like see people talking without Nina being there. So it's all kind of from her perspective of the world. And everybody's a bit different and a bit weird. And it's not really embracing the weird, it's just embracing who you are and accepting it.
Yeah, absolutely. You say that the whole family was a bit, weird and stuff, and you see that in the episode where they're all sort of masking to impress the fiance's dad. What was that? Was that sort of intentional thing that you wanted to show within the...
That was one of the hardest episodes, the hardest episodes to write, because party scenes are really difficult, and but yeah, we wanted to have this idea of them all masking, but more forcing Nina to mask.
Yeah.
And I guess it was just like a really kind of simple way of trying to articulate the idea of masking to audiences who didn't know it's pretending to impress somebody, but instead of pretending to impress your boss, you're trying to just like be normal. You're trying to just like sneak by everybody else without, you're not trying to impress anybody, you're just trying to like fit in. So it was a way of articulating that in a kind of exaggerated sense. Yeah,
it was a good way of articulating it, I thought. And with Nina just being like constantly want to talk about these tiny glasses, and she couldn't do it. It was hilarious.
That was one of my main. I was like, Matilda, he has to have tiny glasses. I just, because that is one thing that when I see somebody with tiny glasses, I just can't focus on anything else. I don't know how you look through them without seeing the rim.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be annoying, I imagine, with those tiny glasses. Yeah, for sure. At the end of last year, you won 2 Scottish BAFTAs for Dinosaur, so congratulations for that. That's amazing. What was that experience like for you?
That was, not going to lie, a very, very, very difficult day. The BAFTAs came like a week after my mum had died, and it was mainly just a blur, if I'm honest. I was convinced I wasn't going to win anything because I think I was up against Baby Reindeer in every category, or except for the acting one, where I was like definitely not, because I was up against Dune McKeegan, who is, legend, icon. But it was like, I didn't even care. It was just a very stressful night, and then it was done. It was really nice to win, and it was lovely, but I've not really got my brain round to process it, because it's just still very much tied up with, that was the week after my mum died, and she'd like predicted it months before. She'd said, I'm going to wait until something really big happens, and that's when I'm going to die. And I was like, ha ha ha. And that's exactly what she did.
Yeah, I imagine it will take you a while to process. But, it's a big achievement. So congratulations anyway,
Thank you.
Do you feel like the portrayal of autism in the media has evolved? And what would you like to see more of in terms of representation?
I think that the portrayal of autism has definitely evolved. We know it's evolved. Rain Man was their point of reference for the longest time. And as much as I think it was well intentioned, and I don't think it was, meant to make fun or be mean, I don't even think it's that bad a film. I think it's definitely evolved. I think representation is super important, but I think once we get to a stage where we have like good representation, then like, because people always say, oh, but actors are pretending, and I'm like, fair enough, but if you're autistic, there's not a lot of, and you can't like mask it. If you have more profound needs and you can't mask that, then there's not that many acting parts for you. So I really appreciate when I get to see in like shows, American shows, where you have people with more profound learning disabilities getting the opportunity to play those characters, rather than have it just be somebody putting on a funny voice. And I think that autism's part of that. But I think that it's also just about people telling their stories. I'd like to see like non-verbal people who have and their families' stories told, because I think it's like, one, there's a lot of myth about the idea of being non-verbal, and two, there's non-verbal people who have things to say, maybe not in the traditional sense, but they have things to say. I don't know how we'd say them, but I think there must be a way of telling that story, being authentic, being true, but also in a way that's translatable to the neurotypical world.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think there will be a way to show that, and I think more of it would be great to see. Do you have any recommendations of good autism representation in TV or film?
There's a show that's not out in the UK yet. It's called The Pit, and it is a medical drama. It's very, 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 very accurate, and to the point where it might be a bit gory.
Okay.
But there's a character who is the sister of a neurodiverse woman, and you see the sister, and the sister's played by an autistic actress who's been in Atypical. She's been in loads of stuff. She's very talented. It's very American, but they're kind of, without saying it, they're showing this sort of familial trait of, I've not watched it all, so I don't know, it's not all out yet, but there's definitely, like, I feel very seen. It's the first time that I've watched TV and I've seen a character that I'm like, oh, she's like me, she's very competent, she's very smart, she's very good at her job, but there's things that I can see in myself that she needs that I need. And that was interesting to see in a sort of non-diagnosed way as well. There's a show called Bones, and for me that was the first time Dr. Temperance Brennan, played by Emily Deschanel, was the first time I'd seen the same social skill issues I have on television through a woman, but also very competent, very good at her job, very exceptional in our field. And I think I always like to see that. I like to see competence.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the myths that I don't like, is like that autistic people are somehow incompetent when we're actually highly competent. And it's not just at like math, or we all have different skill sets, and again, different interests, and like mine is words and expression. And I really love to write and express myself. And because of that, I'm really good at explaining my autistic feeling, which then makes other people go, oh yeah, I feel that too. And that's a really nice thing that I know I can put to use that. So I like to see competent ladies, competent queens doing their best, but also being neurodiverse and different.
Yeah, I love to see that, and I love to read about it as well. I think it's nice seeing autistic women, just working in their special interest fields and doing stuff like that. It's just so nice to see them doing what they're passionate about. It's great.
Yeah.
How did you first get involved in comedy and acting, and how does being autistic affect the way that you work?
I was a child actor, so everybody thinks that I like followed in my mother's footsteps because she was a stand-up comedian, but I was a child actor when she was a barmaid. I started modelling when I was really, really young, and having autism undiagnosed definitely affected that, because I followed instruction so well and I was so easy that when they would have like these big fair days, there was a man called Mr. Beltrami who was a photographer for the Evening Times, and he would come to my parents' pub and he'd pick me up and take me to these events because he didn't want to have to ask random children to pose because they wouldn't do what they were told. So I'd get taken to like some Beano event or some Glasgow Fair May Day thing, and he'd just sit me down and be like, okay, do this, do that, look down to the side and smile. And I would do exactly what I was told. He'd take 3 pictures and then I'd get a bag of Milky Buttons and taken home. And then my picture would be like, the local child, Ashley Storrie, enjoys the May Day. And I'm like, I did not come from that area. A man called Mr. Beltrami drove me there because I'm easily told what to do. But I was very good at following directions. And I was if it was a clear direction, I was very good at it. So I got a lot of acting work and a lot of modelling work when I was a little, like from the ages of 1 till I started school, 5. And yeah, that had a big impact on it. And then my mum started doing comedy, and then I was in the stand-up comedy world, and I was really good at retaining other people's material, which was funny because I'd know if you'd stole a joke, because I'd be like this horrible little 13-year-old backstage, and some comedian would come off stage and I'd be like, you stole that joke from Sandy so-and-so, blah, blah, blah. I've seen him do it 3 times at Blackfriars, and I would have this full retentive memory of everybody's stand-up comedy. But then it was just learning. I was just absorbing everything. So when I started doing stand-up comedy, the kind of stuff that you struggle with at the start, like how to hold a mic, how to stand, where to stand, that was all easy. That was all in my head already, because I had been watching people do it, and my whole life is faking and performing. So it was easy to perform in front of people because I'm already doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And I also really enjoyed stand-up comedy because nobody could talk back, and I got to talk about what I was interested in, and everybody had to listen, and nobody could tell me to shut up.
Yeah.
That was great.
No, that makes sense with you saying that performing is like, masking in a way. It's because you're always pretending, and it's like you may as well just be acting. It makes sense. We've had a couple actors on so far, and they've said similar. We had Tom Ury on earlier, and he was talking about that too.
Yeah, and also it was just like when I was younger, I didn't know I was masking, but I would find ways to I'd put on an accent and just do a completely different character, and that was sometimes just easier than masking, because it was like putting on a whole new facade.
What are some of the misconceptions about autism that you wish people understood?
I think that the idea of emoting. A lot of people are like, oh, you're all robots and you don't have feelings. And I think there's the sort of hyposensitive versus hypersensitive, whereas I feel everything. I feel everything, and it's horrific, and I wish I didn't. And it's like, I feel too much and I don't like it. And I think that was one of the things that when I was younger, I was like, well, I can't be autistic because I cry. And autistic people, because of the way it's been portrayed and because of the way my dad is, I was like, autistic people don't feel things, which is so untrue. The amount of neurodiverse people I've met who are just like big old sponges for feelings, everybody's feelings, not even our own. We're like sucking them all up, and we're hyper vigilant of how everybody's responding to everything. And yeah, that's a big misconception, that we lack empathy or we lack feeling when we're just maybe not as good at processing the feelings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, our feelings might come out in different ways, but it doesn't mean we're not feeling them, or it might take us some time before we, have our feelings come out, but, doesn't mean we're not
delayed response. The
Yes.
delayed response to a feeling is the worst thing in the world. Like, I'll start crying at my radio show, and my producer Paul will be like, what's wrong? And I'm like, oh, I've just realised how I feel about this thing that happened last week. And he's like, okay, good. Well, I'm glad you sorted it out. Can we go on air now?
Yeah, sometimes I'll just look at my dog and I'll be like, the idea of not having you one day, even though she's only 2, and then I'll start crying. It's like, what are you crying for?
Can't do that. I make up stories in my head while I'm on public transport, especially if I'm listening to music that emotes things in my head, where I'll just be like on the outer circle in Glasgow, and then I'll just start sobbing, and somebody will look at me and I'm like, I had a maladaptive daydream. Stop it. I can't explain it. I was a sideman and then they all died and I was the only survivor. And I'm not coping well.
Yeah. If you could give your younger self some advice, what would it be?
Oh, spend less time trying to be different. Different from who I am. I spent so much time trying to fit in, and I did the character good for 2-3 years. I played teenage girl really well, but it was really exhausting, and I missed out on so much of my education because I was so busy trying to socially be like everybody else. There was a 6-month period where I just didn't speak in public because people said I was annoying. And I realised that they liked me better if I didn't speak. So I just didn't speak so that people would like me better. And it was horrible. It was a horrible, horrible thing. So yeah, ignore that. Palm those people off. They're all horrible, Ashley. Why do you want to be friends with them? They're douche heads. Just hang about with your pal John Lees. He's fine. He writes comic books and is probably autistic too, but doesn't really want to talk about it.
Yeah. What age would you have been when you weren't speaking for 6 months?
17, 18. So like peak, trying to be cool, trying to fit in with boys, and like boys told me I was annoying, and I was a girl who spoke, and it took me a really long time to realise that, like, when I went on the internet and I joined social media and I would type stuff and straight away somebody would be like, you're annoying, and I'm like, well, this is just a default. I'm a woman saying a thing, so there will be a man somewhere who thinks that is by nature annoying. But I thought it was me, so I took that to heart. But yeah, it was just constantly being told, you're annoying, and then I just, oh well, get a thicker skin, stop being so annoyed.
What's the fact that people would be surprised to know about you?
I don't think anybody would be surprised about anything because I live so out loud. I don't have any mystery about me. I don't know why. I just feel like I don't like the idea of somebody getting me or like a gotcha. So I just do that 8 Mile at the end of Eminem's 8 Mile where he just says everything bad about himself before anybody else can say anything bad. I just write a lot of Harry Potter fan fiction, play The Sims, and watch Deadliest Catch. Like, cool. I watch a lot of Real Housewives. People sometimes are shocked by that, but it's not really that shocking. Everybody watches Real Housewives.
Yeah, there was stuff about reality TV in the Dinosaur, wasn't there?
Yeah, so I was determined, and Matilda watches Real Housewives with her dad, so it was like something that we shared. Here's something you might not know about me. If you ever watch the programme This Morning, it's sometimes sponsored by Ninja air fryers, and I'm the voice of the Ninja air fryer advert.
Cool. Well, there you go. That is a surprise.
It's me who goes, ease into morning with the Ninja double stack air fryer. That's me.
So we're on to the final question now. What does being autistic mean to you? It's a tough one.
It's just being myself.
Yeah.
So I think that if you start I think that when you try and categorize it and sort of diagnose it, it gets a bit lost in the idea that it's just yourself. That's just who you are. And I think once you kind of accept, rather than accept it as a diagnosis, but just accept it as like a nub of yourself, that is great. It's a facet of you. It's what makes you you. So being autistic is being me.
That's a great way to put it. But that's all of my questions for today. Ashley, it's been so amazing to have you on. If anyone's watching, please have a look at Dinosaur on BBC because it's incredible. Can't wait to watch season 2. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Heather.